Okay, welcome world. Welcome once again to this episode of the Raelian View. As always, we're joined by Dr. Bridget Brosilier and Thomas Koenzig, and I'm Glenn Carter. And today we're going to talk about the recent death of an amazingly influential writer and research scientist, and I'm going to call him that, Erich von Daeniken, and about his life's work and its legacy. And I hope you enjoy our chat. So let's get underway.
One of the first stories I read in Erich von Däniken's books is about Easter Island. I clearly remember that, these statues. Yeah. Erich von Däniken, in his book, he obviously focuses a lot on the statues, who made them, how were they transported down along the coastline, because basically Easter Island, you have, I think, about 100 statues, and they're really around the island, different locations. Sometimes there's just one, sometimes there's 5 together, but it's spread out, right? And so he focused a lot, from what I remember reading the book, were they able to one, carve them out of stone themselves, and 2, how do you bring these heavy stones down to the coast and then put them up, right? So the archaeologists there, they have their obviously kind of mainstream view. Yes, it was human made, and I kind of I can entertain both ideas there, but more interestingly, actually, that's something I looked into more while I was there, is the whole creation story. And I had to, when you're in Easter Island, you actually have to, every time you go to a park, you have to hire a local guide. It's part of their way of keeping the economy afloat. And one time I had somebody who was more from mainland Chile, but the second time she was really one of the, she was a Polynesian herself, right? She wasn't Spanish. Most Chileans are, obviously from the Spaniards, right? The white people, so to speak. But she was really from the island. She was also kind of, I don't want to say there's no strong independence movement there, but she was kind of, being a native, we talked a lot about the decolonization, all these things, and she knew a lot about the whole stories and all the history. And I asked her, so what is the and I you can verify this online, it's not like it's just her story, but what's the creation story? I mean, according to Rapa Nui, which is part of Polynesia, what is how did we come about in this world? And interestingly, it's a polytheistic, like pretty much everywhere around the planet, it's a polytheistic culture, and they have a multitude of gods. The main God, in quote, just for lack of sign, they call him God. A name is easy to remember, and you know right away. His name is Make, but in English it's spelled M-A-K-E, make. So for me, I'm thinking of the maker. So yeah. Make was the main creator god. Interestingly, he had a female companion. Her name was Huawa, and already, if you come from a people who look at things from a monotheistic culture, have this idea of an almighty God. Well, hang on, here they have names, they have a companion, very, very human-like traits and behaviors. And of course, there's a multitude of gods, plural. Something that is what links for me very strongly also with the messages is they have a what they call a bird cult. And so not now anymore, but in the past, they basically had, from every clan, there was one guy, so Easter Island is one big island, and then you have a very small island about, half a mile in front of it. It's not inhabited. But so every year as a contest, they had to, they were going down the island, it's a pretty steep cliff, and then swim to that little island, and then the first one to find the bird egg and bring it back, he was then for a whole year given special status. But it's interesting to kind of look at why they had this what they call this bird cult, because the bird played a very important role, because they were saying the bird, it conveys divine powers came from the bird. Now again, if I look at this from a Raelian point of view, I mean, again, primitive people, right? When they see people coming from elsewhere, well, the only thing they've probably seen coming from elsewhere are birds, right? So this bird cult, the idea, so that divine power from the bird, it was probably because the Elohim were, yes, appearing, and they saw, just like in Christian culture, right? The angel is always depicted. You see a small being with wings,
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
only thing come in the sky, birds, right? So
Mm.
as far as primitive people knew, so it's very interesting to see how, and obviously, I think whether the bird was kind of referring to the Elohim coming down with a belt, or maybe even a UFO. Again, we don't know how the primitives at the time saw this, but a very explicit link, I would say, to the story of creation as we know it, but obviously mystified by primitive people who liked science. But I think it's very explicit, and all over Polynesia, really, you have a. If you look at the different tribes and in different islands, it's always the same story of gods, plural, with names and
Yeah.
interacting also with people there.
Fascinating. It's really fascinating, isn't it? So, okay, so obviously we are here today. Our idea was to talk about the very sad passing. I say sad. Who knows? He may have gone to a far better place than here. Of Erich von Däniken, and Erich von Däniken died on January the 10th, at the age of 90 years old. And Erich von Däniken obviously is a hugely influential writer. He took massive sort of personal risks, really, to put his book out, or his many books. Initially in sort of 1968, I think Chariot of the Gods was published first, and it was so by scientists and mainstream thinkers ridiculed, but to a large degree, which we know is always the way. Anybody who has a new idea or something different to the mainstream is pretty much ridiculed. But Erich von Däniken clearly was. But he was hugely influential on many, many, many people, myself included. You've already said, Thomas, it was influential on you when you read his first book. So let's sort of begin this by, Bridget, what do you feel that Erich von Däniken's legacy will be? What's his main influence on Raelians, for example? And I know he's been to the Raelian movement many times. He's met with Maitreya Rael many times. But Thomas will tell us about that because he knows more about that, I think, probably than anyone. So what do you think his legacy is, Bridget? And how important were his works?
Definitely, we have a lot of Raelians, and maybe Thomas, who have read Erich von Däniken before joining the Raelian movements. So he has been extremely influential in, I think he was one of the first to really push that ideas that we have to look at ancient myths as a technological report, by individuals who didn't have the knowledge, so he couldn't explain what they were seeing, but they were describing it so that for the future we could read it again. So he encouraged people to read ancient books with a different mind, with a different way to read them, and that's what the Raelian philosophy is. And in the first book of Rael, that is now into called Intelligent Design, clearly takes samples of the Bible and illustrate that, or re-express it, or explain it with a scientific mind, very clear scientific vision. And so there are lots of, he was one of the first to really go and describe, read the Book of Ezekiel and sees a UFO, a description of a UFO there, but also the vimanas in the Mahabharata,
Mahabharata
of India, and that was much earlier in time, like 3600 before Christ or something like that. There was the Ezekiel report, but the one I like the most, and he was very good at describing that, is the Book of Enoch. It's one of my favorites. It's an apocryph one, so it's not among the Jewish acknowledged books, but still, it's a description of a young man who meets individuals who are not from Earth, and they took him on a planet with very strange plants, very strange animals, and they educated him and brought him back. So it's really like reminding me of the second book of Rael, who explained his visit to the planet and how he was taken there and all that. So he was very active at explaining these things. He was presenting them with questions. And his answer, he didn't want to dispute the theory of evolution. So he was still thinking that we have been here on Earth for millions of years. At one point, these individuals, these extraterrestrials arrived and they modified us or they educated us in many ways. So they interfered with who we were and then they left. So he didn't get that part right. And it was not his job. I think the job of Rael is very different. It was helped by Erich von Daeniken and a few others who are still perpetuating his work right now. I was on my feed. There was a new book, something the Anunnaki something by Dr. Lin. So she's a scholar and she's writing about that and gave a beautiful testimonial on the death of Van Däniken, saying that as a young girl of 6, she just saw that documentary of the Chariots of God, and then now she's trading his work, right? But the answer that's what the Raelian philosophy brings is that yes, we are not alone. Yes, there are extraterrestrials out there, an infinite number of them. One of them was at the origin of who we are. It's not that they messed up with us or they enhanced us. They created us, but they also have a message for all these Ezekiel, whoever met them. They brought a message, and the most important is the message. What do we do with that knowledge? What do we do with ourselves, with our life, with this civilization? Do we destroy it, or do we go into another age of wisdom and peace? So that part could not be carried by someone like Van Däniken, because I think, and maybe Thomas, you have more about that he met with Rael and was kind of dismayed that he was not the one who had been contacted. But we are, to summarize, we are grateful for his great work, 40 books, hundreds of lectures, and hundreds and probably thousands of millions of people who read that and had a little more open mind to what we have to say.
Yes, because it is, of course, it's almost Von Däniken was the first step in the awakening of the idea that many social media influencers now are talking about it all of the time. Life from elsewhere, life from other planets. Did they create life here? So it's everywhere. It's everywhere on social media. People really trying to investigate by looking through history and looking at various writers, and Carl Sagan and Zacharias Sitchin and various other people are in the similar sort of club to Von Däniken. But Von Däniken kind of was the one that I don't know, and I haven't looked. In fact, if Carl Sagan was before Von Däniken or Zacharias Sitchin was before, I don't know, and I don't really care. It's all because the truth is the truth, right? It is the truth. So whoever brings it is just bringing the truth. It's not like one person copied another one who copied another one because they were the first one to say it. The truth is owned by all of us, and we have a right to discover that. And Von Däniken specifically became really the one that I discovered. He was the popular one. I later looked into the other writers of a similar ilk, but it was Von Däniken that popularized it and really has awoken so many people to the possibility of extraterrestrial life, whether it be what did he call it, interventionism, that's intervened in life that was already here, whereas as Raelians we believe that life was originally and created specifically, as you said. But the truth is there. The truth is there for lots of these writers, and little bits of truth, and the Raelian philosophy has brought it to a spearhead of clarity, which I think is utterly wonderful. But there's one thing I find I'm offended for Von Däniken, and I still am offended because it's on his Wikipedia page even now, along with his death date. So it's been updated. and that I just want to read it to you. And it annoys. It just annoys me, is because the idea that people, for example, I have a Wikipedia page, right? And somebody decided to write years ago, Glenn Carter's lying about an award he won on Broadway, and I didn't. I was honoured at a function, and it was Outstanding Performance Awards, and I was honoured at that thing, giving an outstanding performance in Broadway, and at some program of some show I did years later said most outstanding. They put the word most in front of it, and somebody wrote an article on there saying this is a lie. This award doesn't exist, and it took about 3 years to get it taken down. I had to show, and I wasn't allowed to influence it. And I feel that level of people making comment when they're already in a critically looking at somebody in a negative sense, as opposed to critically looking to evaluate someone's work. My point is, they say always, and almost everywhere I've read about von Däniken, a Swiss author of several pseudo-scientific books, like pseudo. So I said, okay, what is the exact definition of pseudoscience? So I just looked. Pseudoscience consists of statements, beliefs, or practices that claim to be scientific or factual, but are inherently incompatible with the scientific method. But which annoys me, because we know, we've talked about it, Bridget, you brought it up a few episodes of our podcast ago, methodological naturalism, which is a convention in science that makes something scientific, that scientists have to ignore anything in order for it to be considered as scientific. It has to come from the natural world. It cannot come from a creation by a human being, for example. It has to come from the natural world. And so science itself, as far as I'm concerned, is pseudoscience, because it automatically precludes anything other than something that naturally occurs. So if somebody did create life here, and that is actual science, forever scientists call it pseudoscience. And I find it offensive that his life's work is spoken of in that. And I'm not a scientist, but it really bugs me that a guy has dedicated his life to trying to discover the truth and trying to find out critically where we came from. Because do I believe in evolution? No. There are so many examples of things I could give, that reasons why I don't believe in evolution. And do I believe in God? No. So, and I'm sure von Däniken, regardless of whether he criticized evolution, was looking at those arguments critically. That he deserves a round of applause, and he deserves respect. Not on his Wikipedia page, pseudoscience, 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 and scientists. Bugs me. You're a scientist, Bridget. How do you feel about it? Am I wrong in that assessment, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, what I feel very scientific of him is that he asked questions. He didn't pretend that he had all the answers.
Yeah.
So just that is a very scientific way to do it. But I would say when you somehow in that age, when you're treated as pseudoscience, it's almost as a badge of honor.
Oh, yeah.
I almost look at it that way, because I've been treated that way, but I
Yes,
think I'm doing pretty neat science.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not easy to deviate. He was the pioneer in that sense, that he dared say things. He didn't deviate as much as he should have. He didn't question the evolution theory, probably to fit somehow in that. But he asked questions, and he encouraged people to question all the established, the academic, the religious, and the historical belief or narratives of the time. So, yeah, for that, yeah, he has to get all the label as pseudoscience, but I would say it's not a bad one.
Yeah, but as you say, yes, you said science should be asking questions, but I totally believe we should be asking questions that are on a panoramic scale, not cut it in half and only ask questions about could it have evolved, could it have been a mistake of the natural world. Because, well, like if our society was wiped out, for example, just an example, maybe a silly one, but if our society was wiped out and then in a few 100,000 years and life was created here again, or just say for argument's sake life evolved from the soup of whatever, that when they discover Mount Rushmore, they would have to say, that's from erosion of wind. When the wind swirls round, it drops the nose, because they couldn't, if they imply methodological naturalism, ever say that a creative artist hung himself off the side of the mountain and chiseled it out over his lifetime. They couldn't do that because methodological naturalism precludes that as an answer, and I think that is anti-scientific in my non-scientific brain. Anyway, rant over. So, Thomas, you met Erich von Däniken.
Yes, I mean, I don't want to say I'm here. I don't want to say I'm here thanks to him, but he definitely contributed to, let's say, my own awakening. I was I think it was 15, 16 years old, and we spent a lot of our Sundays at Grandpa's. Usually invite us over for lunch, but then, you talk with the family, but after a while, okay, well, as an adolescent, you kind of want to do your own things. And so I went, Grandpa had 2 rooms full of books. And literally it was, I mean, about all kinds of things, history and stuff. And somehow I stumbled across, he had all the books from Erich von Däniken that were published. And we're talking now late 80s. And all the ones that had been published so far, he had them. And I remember my grandpa telling me, you should read this one first. It was the Chariots of the Gods, which, you both mentioned before, it has a question mark. And he was asking questions. He just, made people think and really awakened, showed other ways of looking at things. It's really, and I think he was ahead of his time. Really, that's why he got a lot of criticism. Did he get some things wrong? Can we interpret some of the artifacts different? Sure, yeah, but it doesn't change the overall huge impact he had. And so I remember already, and pretty much every Sunday I went back to my grandpa's house. I took another one, so every 2 weeks, and I read already about 20 of his books by the age of 17, 18. Wow. And I grew up for my family, I had, my father was an atheist. My mother, yes, she was officially part of the church, but nobody really ever believed in this, the church stuff. So, we went to maybe a funeral and a wedding, but that was about it. And I had an open mind to the origin of life as a teenager. I did, the whole God thing didn't make sense to me, but neither did evolution theory, right? So when I read von Däniken's books, it was like, wow, this is really, I think there's got to be a link between life on Earth and extraterrestrials. He doesn't give the full picture, obviously, but it really opened my mind. And I actually was a member of the Ancient Astronaut Society. I probably still have this member. Yeah, I probably still have this card somewhere.
Yeah, very cool.
And I got, it was obviously pre-internet age, so I got the magazines, and I went to some conferences, and interestingly, just I think it was the first year that I just had been in contact with the local Raelians in Fribourg, where I grew up in Switzerland. And then there was a AAS conference, Ancient Astronaut Society conference in Bern. It's like 20 miles from there. And so I went there, and von Däniken was the main speaker. And, I'm like the new Ray, and I was so excited. And I had this flyer. I remember it was like one of these foldable flyers. And after once, he's done with the lecture, then you could go, he was sitting at a table, and you get an autograph, or get your book signed. And so I walk up to him all excited, and I say, Erich, do you know Rael? And I was thinking, I'm going to bring him the messages and enlighten him. He said, oh, yeah, I know him well. Say hi to him. And I'm like, okay, well, that's it. This. I want to say, but he has a whole truth that we've been, exploring and waiting for all our lives. But obviously, 100 people behind me, so I couldn't talk for a long time. But he was sympathetic. Definitely, he had a sympathetic reaction to know me being a Raelian. But he didn't really then go much more into details. But I know he's been very welcome. He built this mystery park. It was open only 2003 to 2005 or 6 in Interlaken. It's close to where he lived in central Switzerland. And the Swiss Raelians, as a team, went there. I think it was about 2005. And there's a picture where you could see a group, about 20, 30 Raelians and von Daeniken came down and had a nice chat and was happy to take a group picture together. So he met Maitreya Rael in the, I don't know if it was late 70s or 80s in Geneva. And I deep down, my having met him personally, I think, and that's just me, I with my interpretation of it all, but I think deep down he probably knew that what Rael was saying was the truth. Because von Däniken, he was, he came out, he had a very Catholic upbringing. And yes, as much as he didn't denounce evolutionary theory, but he also was very vague about God, and kind of mentioned, God's a bit of a mystery, this whole thing, but he didn't really totally demystify it. I felt he always wanted to kind of stay somewhat mainstream, not to I don't know, anger too many people, or I mean, obviously for him it was also, especially when we're talking in the 80s, already 90s, this is a big commercial enterprise. And I'm not saying he did it for the money, not at all. I think he truly had a beautiful, I should say, some humanitarian interest there, but obviously, it made him a big persona, right? He was, in a newspaper in Switzerland, I mean, worldwide. I mean, he's the most published Swiss author. No Swiss person ever. He almost sold 100 million books worldwide. I mean, they were translated into 30 languages, right? So, but I feel I think deep down, and it would have been interesting to ask him maybe closer to his death what he really thought about Maitreya and the movement and everything. But I think somebody with all the things he knew, it really, but that's for me, and I guess for most Raelians, right? When we read the messages, it brings like all the pieces of the puzzle together. The past, the future, with this philosophy of living in the present moment. So. But when you know all the things he knew, I think deep down he must have thought, yes, he is probably the last prophet. But at the same time, I don't think it was bad that he never became a Raelian, actually.
Yeah,
because maybe he helped to move humanity forward more by being outside of the movement, but being part of it. And I mean, this topic of this, he was kind of the founder of what we call the Ancient Astronaut Theory, right? And at least in the U.S., the way this got mainly popularized, of course, there were his books, but the last 15, 20 years is this series, Ancient Aliens, on History Channel. This is, I think it's still ongoing, I think, with 20 years now. And that really helped to popularize this idea. So if von Däniken would have joined the movement, he may not have had that, because he would have maybe rubbed a few people the wrong way. Because obviously the Raelian philosophy is not just demystifying the past, but there's all many other things, and then the deep spirituality and all the things that come with it, right? So I'm almost, maybe I don't want to say happy he didn't officially become a Raelian, but I think he really opened so many minds and in his way, and so thank you, Erich.
I think absolutely, and I also think that, I mean, we know the difficulties that is faced by anyone, especially from Rael when he published his book, and you get a level of dissent from other people, from other people who wish they'd written the book, and competitors, and I certainly think people who are very, very God orientated, very evolution orientated. Erich von Däniken, I think, definitely softened the way to the idea that was, as I said before, the Raelian philosophy is a very sharp, clear spearhead point to all of the theories that came before, and I think von Däniken can be applauded and credited for certainly beginning that and making that journey for people to be acceptable, to be seen on a tube or in a bus reading a book about this sort of stuff. It is acceptable, it is acceptable, but maybe it wasn't at some time. And when we know that, was it Giordano Bruno got burnt at the stake for saying something, what did he say, that we weren't the center of the planet, wasn't the center of the universe or something? There's been a time where these things aren't possible, and the first person always has to, is faced with a lot of criticism most often. And Rael has lived it. I'm sure von Däniken lived it also. And it has
you know,
to
just thinking back here when you're talking about him being a trailblazer, right? Like, I remember when we were talking mid '90s. I mean, I read his books. That's when I joined the movement, but it was late '80s. At the time, you got to always, we always got to think of the context. At the time, that we had not discovered exoplanets yet.
No.
This is only in 1995 that we actually, and it's not a Swiss person, not to advertise Switzerland, but he was one of the guys who got, I think, a Nobel Prize for this. It's 1995 where I think two astronomers, they discovered the first exoplanet, right? So, but until that time, a lot of people, our solar system is probably unique in the fact that it has planets. Maybe others are stars. There's nothing around. And to see nowadays, obviously, with the thousands are being discovered, and we know as Rain that there's an infinite number of planets and hence also civilizations. But also, look at a lot of, I remember even before I joined the movement, when I talked to my friends about this, right, at school, everybody knew, I'm the guy who talks about von Däniken UFOs, but I mean, this was kind of like, like a totally fringe idea, the UFOs and all that, people laughing at you. And nowadays, they talk about it in Washington. There's this official hearing by all these highly decorated military people and the senators. It's a very suddenly that this thing that 30, 40 years ago, people just, it's a fringe lunatic idea. Yeah. Take it very seriously. So I feel a little bit, I don't want to say sad. I mean, but we enjoy life and death is part of life. But I would have wished for von Däniken to, maybe stick around for another 10 years and see all, basically the Elohim come to the embassy, because it's really, if everything's it's happening right now. And it is obviously, for me, it just proves that, everything that he has been kind of talking about now all comes to and it's wide open and accepted, right? But every truth always goes through these three stages, right? People first they laugh at it, and then they fight against it, and then it's obvious, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Maybe von Däniken will come back with Tesla and stuff one day on a UFO. Who knows? Who knows? But I share your story. Like when I first. When I was at school, I think I must have been 8 or 9. We were asked at school, so they were talking about a class on evolution. It might have even been religious studies. I forget. And they said, so this is how the world was created, and there's other theories, and they are this. So what do you think? And I said, I think it's aliens. And I've never heard. I've still to this day, I try and be funny. I've never had a bigger laugh ever that I got from that comment as a 9-year-old, 8-year-old, or whatever. There was a time when it was seemed natural to me. It just seemed natural to me, as it does to many Raelians. Many Raelians go, yeah, of course, it's an obvious. But to many people, it's a big stretch. And all the works of von Däniken and Sitchin and Carl Sagan, and ultimately the crown on the whole thing of the actual truth of our origins from Rael is a big stretch. But as we spoke about last time, I believe that we are, the humanity, going through a great awakening right now. People are awakening, they're asking questions of authority, questions of those who claim to know when none of us really actually know anything. So I think von Däniken has to be applauded for being one of those pioneers that started this awakening process, certainly on the level of extraterrestrial life, and that maybe there isn't a divine singular God sitting on a cloud somewhere, has to arrive on a fiery chariot and whatever. That he has to be applauded for that, and he will be appreciated, I think, for many, many millennia to come, many, if not infinitely. And I think that what an amazing legacy that is for anyone's life. So, do you have any more thoughts, Bridget, you want to share about anything that we've talked about?
I think we cover, I mean, express gratefulness. That's clear. And and there are plenty of things. I mean, we can go over lots of details, but there was one thing that popped to mind, is that in one of his lectures, he said the he was talking about the pyramids, and Rael says the pyramids haven't been made by extraterrestrials, right? So it's one of the statements that it says
Mm.
there are lots of people who follow Van Däniken and all that. They will more use somehow the pyramids are proof that they are made by aliens. But what I like is he had a very rational mind, saying, okay, when they were done, it was just the time where they were out of Bronze Age, right?
Mm.
And they were learning the process of using stones and all that. And then suddenly you have pyramids. They must have been taught how to do it.
Uh-huh.
It's human beings who did that, but learn how to handle stones, whether they were soft or hard, or how to carry them and all that. That's the mind of an engineer, and they must have been taught on how to do that. That's another, you know, and we know that those who created us, the Elohim, lived with us. They taught us what we needed to know to survive at the time they
Mm.
didn't bring us the full knowledge, but they brought us the knowledge on how to survive, what to eat, but also to look at the stars and to identify them. So that's how we have traces everywhere of their teaching, their interventions, and and how they lived with us and helped us. Yeah. So
Certainly
that's
very interesting.
so an
Yeah,
interesting
so interesting.
part of him. He was pretty spot on. Mhm.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of research into frequencies at the moment. You know, like vibration frequencies for health, and all, just to see, just to try and educate myself on these new ideas and ancient ideas, in fact. But yes, I think it's certainly a very interesting subject, and there's many directions we could go in talking about it. But we've done half an hour or thereabouts, and yeah, just a final thought that von Däniken, I think, as I said, will be appreciated for millennia to come, and possibly even more so than he is today. You know, in the future, I certainly hope so. Anyway, Bridget, thank you so much once again, and Thomas, it's always great to talk with you. Let's do it again soon. Lots of love.